This is like the first time I'm publicly sharing my story, because a lot of people don't really know the backstory except for people like close to me, in terms of, you know, how I used to take off my hijab and stuff. So I was in 9th grade. I was 13 years old when I put on hijab. All right, and hijab for me in my household was something that was kind of expected of me. I wouldn't say it was forced per se. I think if I really protested enough, my dad probably would have been like, okay, you know what, like she really doesn't want to wear this, so I'm not going to force her. But I would say there was a real firm expectation that I wear it. And that wasn't something that came as a surprise. So when I started middle school, my dad had brought it up, and I cried, and I was like, no, I don't want to wear it. And I, you know, already my background is, my mom is Catholic, my dad is Muslim. You know, half my family is Christian, and we didn't really even like truly come in. I didn't start practicing Islam the way I do today until later on in my life, because even when my dad got married to my mom, he wasn't that religious, and then he had this whole epiphany. And so for me, you know, my mom didn't wear it. It wasn't something I was used to, so I had a hissy fit in middle school when he was trying to get me to put it on. But that planted the seed for later, when I knew that he was going to then encourage me to wear it, you know, when I got older and when I started high school. So I think he did that really strategically. He probably knew that I wouldn't wear it, but he probably did that just to plant that seed to let me know, like, well, it's coming. You know, if you're not wearing it now, you're going to wear it in high school. So I was 13, I wore it. You know, and I didn't wear it detesting. Like, I had my best friend. She also went to the same high school as me. We went to an IB high school, so it wasn't my home high school. So this is like a completely new slate of people that I had never met before, with the exception of my best friend, who was going into the high school with me, and she was also wearing it. So we actually made this pact. We were in 9th grade, and we went to orientation together, and we met all of our classmates. Everybody is new, right? And so like it was this new slate. So we made a pact with one another, and we said we weren't going to let the hijab dictate how we acted. We were going to be the same old Melanie and Dalia. We were going to be our crazy selves, outspoken, loud, funny, obnoxious, whatever, right? Like, we weren't going to allow the hijab to change us. And even more so, we were going to prove to everyone that you can wear a hijab and still be yourself and still be, you know, really fun and cool and whatever. Like, we literally made a pact and shook on it. So I was excited. You know, it wasn't something that I was like, I didn't want to do. And then once we started high school, it turns out that 3 other girls in our grade were wearing it, which was really cool. I'm still super close with those girls today, and so it just made it really easy. So I really didn't have any excuse, right? There were 5 girls in my freshman high school class. One of them was my best friend wearing hijab. And alhamdulillah, it really was easy. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't something that was a huge burden for me. Now, as I said, my mom is Catholic, okay? And she's Filipino, my mom is Lebanese. Now, when I did put on the hijab, it was a huge, huge difficulty for my mom, because already my mom and I don't look alike. She's Filipino, I'm mixed. When we're out together in public without hijab when I was younger, no one could even tell we were related. Like, they couldn't even tell we were mom and dad, or mother and daughter. And so the hijab, what it did was it further alienated us. You know, my dad got custody of us. I didn't live with my mom. I only went to her house on the weekends. And my dad had me and my brothers the rest of the week. And so for her, it was really difficult. And she basically put her foot down and was like, you're not going to wear hijab with me. You're just not. And, you know, being 13 and not really truly grasping it yet, or the wisdom behind it, being 13, and as a 13-year-old, I looked like I was like 9. I've always looked really young for my age. So I didn't really care whether or not I wore it, right? Like, my dad said wear it, I wore it. My mom said don't wear it, I took it off, right? I didn't have full conviction in it. So I would, in order to avoid this conflict with my mom, because by the way, you guys, I am not looking at any comments, sorry, I just don't want to get distracted. So I'm really sorry that I'm not reading your comments. I just want to tell the story. So I wanted to avoid the conflict. I just wanted to be with my mom at my mom's house on the weekends and just, that be it. So every single weekend, freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year of high school, I would take off my hijab when I went to my mom's house, and the rest of the week I would wear it when I went to school. Now, I also want to preface this by saying that as Muslimin, we shouldn't flaunt our sins. We shouldn't talk about past sins, right? The reason that I'm telling you this story is to get you to where I am today and how taking it off got me to where I am today. So no, I'm not encouraging anyone to do this, and I hope this isn't giving anybody any ideas. But I really want to be truthful about my story. So every weekend I took it off. We'd go to the mall. I didn't have it on. We'd go wherever. And I don't know. God protected me, I guess. I don't know how I didn't kind of get outed, because our community is pretty major in Michigan, and you can't go to the mall without seeing another hijabi. I truly don't know how I didn't get caught, but for 3 years I did that. And for those 3 years, things were fine. My relationship with my mom was fine, my relationship with my dad was fine, and I wore it at school and everything was fine. Then came my junior year in high school, and it was towards the end of my junior year. So at this point I'm 16, and I've gotten older, and I've grown spiritually. So I started attending a halaqah in high school with a group of girls that I'm still super close with today, including my best friend and those other girls who were wearing hijab in my class. And it was every Thursday night, and I looked forward to that day so much. That was the day, that I got together with these girls. I learned about my deen. It was just an amazing bond of sisterhood between girls, where I could talk to them about my issues, but also have this really great foundational knowledge and sisterhood. And so I really grew, and I owe a lot of that spiritual development and growth to my best friend, who, mashallah, at a very young age was always very spiritually and religiously devout. She was just so in touch with her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she was just, honestly, whenever I talk about her, I get emotional, because I know that I wouldn't be who I am today without her. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this specific person in my life to dictate the trajectory, really, of my entire life. And she was such a pivotal piece. And I remember when I'm going to turn off the AC, I'm sorry, I'm sure it's really loud. I remember when we were in high school, and some girl, I used to brag about how I would take my hijab off on the weekends. You're a kid, and people were curious about hijab and what your hair looks like. And I'm like, oh, I take it off on the weekends when I'm with my mom. And they're like, what? And they were really confused. And I remember my best friend would be there, and whenever I talked like that, she was just so disapproving. She wouldn't say anything, but I could just see on her face she did not like that I was telling people this, and that I was admitting that I did this. So like I said, fast forward, my junior year, I had all this spiritual development, and it got to a point where I actually did care about hijab. I really started to feel like a fraud, and I felt like I had this dual identity. One identity with my mom at my mom's house when I took off hijab, and then one identity the rest of the week at school. And it was something that really started to take a toll on me, because I just felt hey Ahmed, we're doing this a day in the life YouTube video, and so Ahmed's getting some footage. Anyway, so yeah, I just felt like a complete fraud, and I was like, I can't continue to do this anymore. Dude, leave! Oh my God, I'm trying to be so serious. Your haircut looks nice. Okay, everyone say bye to Ahmed.
Bye.
So at that moment, I had to take a stand. And I knew that things were going to come to a head with my mom. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to do it for my own sanity, and because religiously now I really felt like this was something I had to do, fi sabilillah. So I tell my mom, I sat her down, and I was like, I'm not going to take off my hijab anymore when I come to your house. And it did not go over well at all. She basically told me that she wouldn't be seen in public with me and that she didn't want any association with me whatsoever. And I had to make a decision. Either it was the hijab and like my religion, or it was my mom. And that was really, really difficult. And it was a lot of the reason why I took it off to begin with, because I didn't want to have that. I didn't want things to come to a head the way they did. So at that moment when I put my foot down, I had to choose hijab. I had to choose my religion. And I had to choose what I thought was right, notwithstanding the fact that I knew this could really sever a relationship with my mom. So there was a long period of time where we didn't talk. I didn't go to her house anymore. Our relationship was just super strained. And I remember she wrote me this like super long email about how these are just hand-me-down rules from my dad and his dad, and I don't truly know what I'm doing or what I believe in, and I'm just following blindly, and I truly don't really have the conviction in it. And I remember it was so tough. I remember one specific instance. I was taking the ACT, and that email that I just told you about came to me the day before I took the ACT, and I was bawling, and my eyes were just like, when you cry so hard that your whole face is swollen and you can't even open your eyes, like your eyelids are so swollen. That's what happened to me. And I took the ACT the next day. I could barely open my eyes. I bombed it. And it was like I'll never forget that. It was the worst. And those things used to always happen to me. Like when it rains, it pours. It was just like so much, all at once. But I had made this decision. I said that I was going to keep it on, and I was going, whatever the consequence. So I would say about a year went by where I had been firm in my decision, and I fought for it. And I emailed my mom back and I said, no, actually, these aren't hand-me-down rules. And I have studied other religions, and I do know that this is the truth. And I had to really fight for it. And I had to prove to my mom that this is something that I believe in for me. And I'm not doing this for anybody. I'm doing it for myself because I believe in it, because it's the right thing to do, and nothing else. And I truly believe that having fought so hard to wear hijab to your own family, to your own blood, your own mom, puts a conviction in you that nothing else can. I don't know why I'm getting emotional. I'm usually not. I actually watched this whole Oprah thing today on race, and I started crying so hard because issues of race make me very emotional. So that's why I'm emotional today, but I'm not gonna cry. Not gonna cry. So the point is, and I actually was just having this conversation with a girlfriend of mine who had the same experience, where half her family is also Christian, and she had to really fight for her beliefs. And truly, when you have to fight for it, you have to believe it from within. And for those 3 years that I took it off, I didn't believe it. It wasn't something that I had true conviction in. It was something I really was doing blindly, until I wasn't anymore. Until it became a part of me, and until I had that wisdom and that spiritual awakening as to why we're wearing it. It became a part of me. It became a part of my identity. And I decided I could no longer take it off. I couldn't anymore. So that's kind of like the first lesson in this story for all of you, for all of us, is number one, taking ownership. And I talk about this all the time. Taking ownership of our beliefs. Number one in our deen, but very specifically because we're having a conversation about hijab, in your hijab, taking ownership rather, so that you have that conviction. And so often, and we'll get into this later, girls who are taking off hijab never took the time to take that ownership. When I had to fight for it, and I had to convince my mom that, no, I'm wearing this for me, and here's why I'm wearing it, that exercise solidified in my heart why I was wearing it, and it always stayed with me. And taking ownership of this practice for myself in order to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nobody else was so pivotal for me. And I really think had that not happened, I wouldn't be here today with the hijab company, because it also fueled my love for hijab in general. Having to fight for it, you know, and having to prove why I wear it and why it's amazing and why it doesn't oppress me. That was one thing my mom used to always say, was like, you're limiting yourself. You are limiting yourself and not allowing yourself to do this, 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 and this. When we go on vacation, you can't swim. When we're out with family, you can't do this. You know, she looked at all of the things that she thought were limitations, and she's like, why do you want to limit yourself? And thank you, Hiba, for answering everyone's questions. I appreciate you. I'm literally not listening to anything. No, actually, I met Hiba like later in life. But Hiba is an awesome friend. This is why I don't look at comments, because then I get derailed and I don't even know what I was talking about. Yeah. So that was what my mom always used to say, right? Like, it's limiting you, and I have to prove that it doesn't limit me, and that it actually liberates me and elevates me, and it does all these things, and it truly does. But I had to learn how and why, and you know, the background. Like, I needed to, for myself, figure this stuff out. So I know I'm beating a dead horse right now, but that conviction part is really important. So that took about a year, and I would say towards the end of my senior year, my mom and I had an understanding. I wore the hijab around her, but she tolerated it, right? So like, she would tolerate it. She didn't like it. She was very much against it. She would speak out against it all the time, like very passive aggressive comments, and then very outwardly just like, I hate it comments, right? Like, she was very vocal. She wasn't shy about how she felt about it. But at the very least, we were like talking, and we were together, and I would see her. So that was progress to me. And I was like, that's okay, we'll work on everything else later. I think once she sees that I'm serious about this, and then it's not a joke, and that I've made up my mind and there's no going back, then she'll have to just accept it. So, you know, I get into college, and things are getting better, but it's still, you know, again, she just didn't like it. She was just tolerating it. So I finished college. I go to law school. I remember a very poignant moment when I had graduated law school, and I took the bar, and we took a trip to the Philippines, where my mom is from. And so we went it was a huge 75th, and like, my aunt turned 75. And so the whole family went to the Philippines for a reunion, and it's like a surprise for my aunt. And all my family was there, and I remember my mom was talking so much trash about my hijab and how I can't go swimming and I can't do this. And I remember, like, before I left, this is pre-burkini and like Islamic swimwear. So before I left, I like went to Macy's and all these places to go find like something that I could wear in the water, because I knew I wouldn't hear the end of it. All my cousins are swimming, and here I am on the beach covered up with the hijab on, and look at me. So I went and found this, like, I don't know how I found it, but I remember it was like bright blue, and it was a longer top with a hood. It like came with a hood on. I guess it's like for runners. And then I just, at that time, like, flares were in, so I wore these like black flares underneath it that were like, you know, they were running pants. And I got like, you know, whatever. And so I wore that, and I would go in the water, and I went parasailing. I did all these things with my cousins, and I didn't let anything hold me back, because I wanted to show my mom that, like, I could still do whatever any of my cousins were doing, and I wasn't, you know, oppressing myself or limiting myself. So, but she was still talking so much trash. And I remember her family, all of my mom's side, was just like, Beth, like, get over it. It's fine. You know, if this is what she wants to do, just let her do it. It's not hurting you. You know, just like leave it alone. And she didn't want to hear that, but that was so helpful for me to hear that from my family. Now, what I didn't realize at the time that I realize now, and if you guys have, if any of y'all are converts, or you're like me where you have a parent who's not Muslim, and you're struggling, one thing that in retrospect, when I think about it, I really empathize with my mom, was the hijab was one more thing that put a distance between us. So we already don't look alike. I don't live with her. My parents are divorced. There are all these wedges in between us. And the hijab was just like one more thing to be like, we're alienated, right? Like we're just apart. And that must have been really hard for her, that I chose the religion of my father, and I was more in tune with the culture and the language of my father. And here I am now wearing this hijab, and now it's like we're so different. And when I realized that, I had a lot more empathy for the situation. And although she wasn't verbalizing that, I understood it, just kind of reading in between the lines of things that she would say. So I really took that into account, and instead of giving her sass and attitude like I always would, I instead treated the situation with love and with kindness, to say, I don't know why I'm getting so emotional, to say, you know what, I love you, and like no matter what, I'm always going to be your daughter. I'm so sorry. And I had to say that because I think she felt like, you know, this would be something that would ultimately tear us apart. Or like my religion would say that I can't be close to my mom because she's not Muslim or whatever. Why am I crying? I'm so sorry. I like never do this. I'm so not a crier. I'm actually very embarrassed. I'm not a crier at all. So anyway, my mom's actually on Instagram, so I don't know if she's actually watching this. What is it, Sunday? She's probably at home. She may be watching. But the lesson there, so lesson number 2 is in times of conflict to put your ego to the side. All I was doing was trying to assert myself and tell her how she was wrong and I'm right. And that was the wrong approach. It wasn't about right or wrong. It wasn't about trying to assert myself. It was about empathy, understanding where she was coming from. You know what's making me cry is reading you guys' comments. And I'm not pregnant, no. Reading you guys' comments is making me emotional. How do I put these down? I don't want to see them. Anyway, so the lesson is to have empathy and to look at the situation with love and with compassion and kindness. I think had I done that, even in the very beginning when I was still in high school, I would have probably suffered less. But that was a lesson I needed to learn, and it was a really good life lesson for me because, you know, whenever I'm in a situation of conflict, the first thing I do is I put myself in that person's shoes and I think, well, how are they feeling? And even though I'm annoyed that this person is coming at me like this, let me try and understand where they're coming from and why they feel this way, and empathize with them, and then treat them with kindness and show them love. Because that's all anybody wants, is validation, to be heard, and to be treated with kindness. Okay, I need a minute. I can't keep talking like this. I can't do this, you guys. All I have is my breath. I need a tissue. Ahmed, if you're watching, get me a damn tissue. 9 over here. I can't do this. I did not expect this to happen. Can you get me a tissue, please? I need a breather. I need a minute. Give me a minute. He has to get out a new box of tissues. Ahmed, are you watching in the bedroom?
No, here.
So you just hear me crying over here? Thank you.
Yeah, you freak.
Woo! Okay. All right. I shouldn't have watched that thing on race today. That killed that Oprah thing I watched. Okay. So, I think that really does it with that story in terms of my mom. Oh, no, actually, let me tell you like the amazing ending. And so here's another great thing if you are a convert, or you're in my situation and you have people in your life, or maybe your parents are Muslim and they don't support your decision to wear a hijab or whatever. When you have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He says this to us in the Quran, when you have taqwa of me, I will find a way out for you. I'm gonna cry again. I will find a way out for you. And it's true. I mean, what more can you say than that? You put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have taqwa, have tawakkul, and He'll find a way out. So I kind of just left this to God and said, I'm wearing hijab for you, for your sake. I've done all I can do. I leave this to you now. Open her heart and, help the situation. So I got married. I started the company with my husband, and through you guys and all your amazing stories that you would share on Facebook, on our blog, whatever, back in those early days, my mom was slowly, and by no doing of my own, I didn't speak to her, I didn't say anything. I was just putting out content, building my brand and this business, and I wasn't even really, she knew what I was doing, but I wasn't like, hey, look at what I'm up to. She slowly started coming around. And when she read what hijab meant to all of you, and why it was so important to you all, and how it empowered you, she had a mindset that she never had before. And she saw hijab in a way she never did before. I think also when she could take me out of the situation, because I'm her daughter and that's a really emotional thing, but when she saw other people and what the hijab did for them, there was a turnaround. And today, my mom is legitimately our biggest supporter. She literally started a Facebook page called Fans of Haute Hijab or Friends of Haute Hijab, something like that. So cute. And that's how much she believes in what I'm doing. And no longer does she just tolerate the hijab. She supports me, and she's so encouraging and loves the work that I'm doing. And she buys the hijabs even. I'm like, Mom, don't buy anything. I can send you whatever you want. She's like, no. She always insists, and she's so sweet. And alhamdulillah, it's taken a long time. It was a long journey of a lot of pain and a lot of hardship. But as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He'll find a way out. And He found that way out for me. And I don't know. Alhamdulillah. All right. Enough crying. The sob fest is over. I really did not think that was going to happen to me. Woo! All right. So that's my hijab story. I hope you like it. That's my hijab story. So I know we wanted to talk about a lot of things about hijab in this live. One of the things that I really wanted to touch on is two things. So girls taking it off. A lot of girls taking it off. And then what do you do when somebody takes it off, right? Like, how do you deal with that? What do you say? I think it's really important. I don't think it's healthy that we just ignore it. And I also believe that there's a right way to go about it. So, all right, girls taking it off. I just did a YouTube Ask Melanie on this, but I'm just going to summarize really quickly. As I see it, there are three main reasons why girls are taking hijab off in droves. Number one, and most obvious, I think, is the current political climate, right? But that's on a spectrum. You have, at one end, the very legitimate fear, especially right around the election, and this Ramadan was really tough. Legitimate fear, especially from people who live in really remote areas where there's not another hijabi in their town. It's a legitimate fear. All the way to, using this political climate kind of as a scapegoat or as an excuse to say, I've been wanting to take off hijab for a long time. Now's the right time to do it because no one will say boo, right? Like nobody's going to say anything to me. If I do, it'll be understandable that like this just is difficult for me. So, and there's everything in between that spectrum. In the middle, I think, is the people who are like, I'm done being the ambassador for this faith and I'm done sticking out. I just want to blend in. I just want to be anonymous. I just want to be somebody who can walk the streets at work, whatever, at school, and nobody knows that I'm Muslim. So that's the spectrum as I see it. And you have people along that spectrum taking it off. The second thing that I see is our society that we live in that promotes a lifestyle, a aesthetic, a way of life that is at odds with our values as Muslimin. Need I say more? And you've got girls who fall prey to this. Maybe they don't have a strong group of girlfriends that are, on it when it comes to their deen. Maybe they're just weak, like they see what their friends are doing and they want to be a part of that. They want to feel a certain way. Like, sorry, I'm not articulating myself well. I just got a text and that really distracted me. So I think within like the society today, a lot of it is vanity because that's what society teaches us, to all be super vain people that are so consumed by our looks and how other people see us and being sexual and attracted to the opposite sex at all times because that's like the pinnacle of your beauty and your self-worth. I mean, that's what society is teaching us, right? And so a lot of girls just fall prey to that. There's that. And then I have this like third category of people who, it's like the people who, their Islamic knowledge and educational base never matured beyond like Sunday school. And so maybe they were wearing hijab when they were younger, and then as they got older, they never kept up with their Islamic teachings. They never kept up learning the deen, and so things just started to slip, like prayer and a lot of times like you see people take off hijab, but guess what? They haven't prayed in years. You know what I mean? Like why? Like to them, they're thinking like, why do I even wear this? I don't even pray. I don't do the basics, right? And so there are people who just kind of fell off. They kind of disassociated themselves with the community, kind of isolated themselves, got busy in life, had a career, had kids, and are just like super inundated with all these dunya things that they just forgot about the rest, like this didn't have this strong connection to a community, to Muslims, to Islam, to deen, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so after a while, it just kind of like comes off. And those are kind of like the three buckets that I put people in whenever I see or hear of a person who's taken it off. Now, all that being said, if you feel that you're in one of those buckets, right? Either like you're the person who has not kept up with your Islamic upbringing, that let me saying this to you be the sign that God is telling you that you need to start returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever way, shape, or form that may be. Make dua, start praying again, open up the Quran, take a class, go teach Sunday school, go to a halaqah, whatever. Attach yourself to those things again and let your heart soften towards Islam and towards the deen. And certain things in that I'm saying right now are way more important than whether or not you're wearing the hijab, like salah. Make sure you're praying, like that aqidah, that you have a very strong, non-shakeable foundation of your faith and what you believe in. These things are so important, and hijab will follow. So, if that's what you're struggling with, then let this be, your reminder. If you're struggling with that second bucket, with like the society around us and influences, outside influences, turn those external influences off. Distance yourself from the people that are bringing you down. Stop watching those terrible, terrible trash TV shows. Stop looking at people's Instagram that is only making you feel ugly and that you're only beautiful if you can attract a man. Stop looking at it. Don't indulge in it. Don't consume it. Get away from it. If you're in the first bucket of people where you're like, you know what, I'm done being the ambassador for Islam, or, you know, you're worried about the political climate, there's a lot to say in that one. For that, I'd actually encourage you to listen to my live stream on I'm afraid to wear hijab. I want to take it off. Not live stream. It's a YouTube video called Ask Melanie, I'm afraid to wear hijab. Go listen to that if you're in that bucket. So like I said, those are like the three main buckets that I see people in. Now, let's say your friend takes off hijab. How do you act? What do you do? What do you say? Well, it depends. It depends because it depends on your relationship with that person. I would put it into two separate situations. If you're close with that person, and if this is just like an acquaintance. I'll start with if you're close to this person. If you're close to this person, my advice to you is 110% don't ignore it. Don't pretend like nothing happened and the next time you see them it's like, oh, it's nothing. That person themselves taking off the hijab, that is a red flag, right? It's like almost like a cry for help. And so if everybody around them is not giving them what they're expecting they're going to get, which is concern, then that's going to further alienate them. So if you're close to that person, then I really suggest you reach out to them personally. If that means calling them up, going out together one-on-one, texting, whatever. But remember what I said about my mom earlier. It's not about asserting your ego. It's not about convincing them to wear hijab. It's not about telling them what's right or wrong. This is not about you. It's about the other person, putting yourself in their shoes, having compassion and kindness, and treating them with love, because that's what they need in this situation. All right? Your goal is not to get them to put the hijab back on. That's not your goal. Your goal is to be there as their Muslim sister should be. All right? So it's getting them to open up, to understand what happened. You know, what happened that led you to this point. Being concerned for the other areas of their life. Are you still praying? Making sure that, hey, listen, you took off hijab, okay. But I hope that you're still praying. That even though you don't have hijab on, you're carrying it with you in your purse so that when you're out, you can pray. Because I never want you to miss a prayer. Because that is so important. Being concerned that even though they took off hijab, they don't go in the opposite direction and start, you know, just, it's all out now. Just completely like 180, clubbing, drinking, and all that stuff, right? Like you're concerned for their well-being. That is what I would say with somebody that you're close to. Address it with love and compassion and kindness, and remember that it is not about you. And I think that it's natural for us to feel almost threatened, right? Like when somebody takes off hijab, it's like we're our own little sports team. And when somebody quits the team, we're like, hey, what the hell, dude? You're supposed to be loyal to this tribe. Like, what, where'd you go? What are you doing? I feel like it's kind of a natural response that we almost feel threatened and like, what the hell? But like I said, it's not about you. It is not about you. It is about that person. So we have to try and let that go and not let our ego kind of get the best of us in that situation. Now, if this person is somebody that you don't know very well, it's an acquaintance. This one is a little bit trickier, I would say. But here's what I will say. Never at any point, if somebody you know took off hijab, who's more of an acquaintance, should you cut them out of your life. We should never be cutting anybody out, ever. So what happens when people isolate themselves from girls who took off hijab is they start to isolate themselves as well, because they don't feel that love anymore. They don't feel welcome. They feel like they're being judged. And so they don't start coming around anymore. And before you know it, they have their whole new crew of people who may not be leading them to what's best. And so even if you're just acquaintances, make sure that that person knows that, listen, you're always there for them. So something that I do that I think is helpful is I'll say, hey, I noticed you took off your hijab. I just want to let you know that if you ever need to talk, I'm here for you. Anytime, any place, any time of day, I'm always here. I'm here for you. And, you know, when their birthday comes around, you still wish them a happy birthday on Facebook. You know, when you see them, you still give your salams and you're excited to see them. You don't cut that person off, right? And I think that that's so important because they need to still feel connected and loved. And, you know, okay, they may not wear hijab anymore, but that doesn't affect how you feel about them as your Muslim sister. So that would kind of be my advice as an acquaintance. We can't have this like mean girls attitude of like, oh, she took off her hijab, so we're not like, she's not part of my crew, we're not tight anymore. Never, 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 never cut anybody off. Never cut anybody off. We should always, always, always maintain ties with people. So that's my advice and kind of what I have to say for now. I also filmed a video on what to do when somebody takes off hijab, and I'm sure I'm missing a lot, but that'll get up on YouTube eventually. Okay, so moving on to the next part, and then I'll finally get into all you guys' comments. Oh my God, I've been talking for 45 minutes. Is the right way to wear hijab. I really wanted to get into this today. And I had kind of said the right way in quotations because I'm going to talk about two things. The first thing is when people say what's the right way to wear hijab is, I don't know how to phrase this lightly because people always just they get very, very passionate about this subject. Let me say it this way. There's no one right way to wear hijab in terms of the articles of clothing. However, there is a right way to wear hijab in terms of what is being covered and how it's covered. That being said, if you're in Saudi Arabia, the cultural tradition of wearing a black abaya is going to dictate how you wear hijab. If you live in Southeast Asia, let's say you live in Malaysia, the culture of Malaysia is going to dictate how you wear hijab, which means you're probably going to wear a square scarf, and it's probably going to drape around your chest, and you're probably going to wear really beautiful pastel colors, and you're probably going to wear, you know, wide leg pants. That's okay. If you live in Africa, like when I was in Nigeria, the culture that you're in will dictate how you wear hijab. So that's really stunning, locally made prints and head wraps and bright colors and beautiful motifs. That's going to dictate how you wear hijab. And I think you all know what I'm saying here. And I see this a lot, forgive me if I'm overgeneralizing, but I see this a lot with especially Muslims outside of America. Maybe because we are American, we kind of get this because we kind of have like a little cultural mosaic in America, if you will, a little melting pot, where I think Muslim communities elsewhere are still very insular, very much in a bubble. And so if you're wearing Western clothing, it's like Western clothing is like the clothes of the devil, and it's not true. You're not truly dressed as a Muslim if you're wearing Western clothes and stuff. And I always see those types of comments from people, like they're never American. A lot of times they're British. I'm just saying. I notice it a lot on my friends' pictures who are from the UK. So the reason I say that is to say that there is a correct way to wear the hijab in terms of what you're covering and how you cover it. But the articles of clothing, whether you choose to wear an abaya, you choose to wear loose-fitting pants, you choose to wear a long dress, you choose to wear a skirt and a top, however you choose to do it, which will most likely be dictated by the culture that you live in, and culture is a beautiful thing. We should never belittle culture. Culture is what makes us feel good and feel attached to a community. Will more than likely dictate how you wear the hijab. Now, that being said, there is a correct way to wear the hijab. And I think that today, a lot of what we're seeing in terms of how the hijab is worn, my heart's beating fast because this is a touchy subject, is alarming. It's alarming. And before I get into it, I want to preface it by saying this. There's a difference between you're struggling with hijab and you know what's right, but you're wearing it incorrectly and you know it's incorrect, but because this is just all you can do right now. And God willing, and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help, you're going to get there. However, when you know that it's incorrect, or you refuse to accept that it's incorrect because you're telling yourself that you can choose the right way to wear it, disregarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's very clear statements as well as the hadith that support them, that is an issue. That is an issue. So, two girls may be wearing it incorrectly, right? But the one girl who's struggling and she's wearing it incorrectly, but this is all she can do right now, will be dealt with very differently than the girl who's wearing it incorrectly, knows she's wearing it incorrectly, and doesn't care. Particularly if this girl who doesn't care influences others, has a platform that can influence others, and is just being reckless, just being negligent. So I want to preface it by saying that, okay? Because again, this is something that's so touchy and a lot of people get very passionate, and whenever this topic is brought up, inevitably somebody is like, just leave them alone, stop judging, people struggle. I get people struggle, but I don't think that should silence us when it comes to talking about what's right and what's wrong. And perhaps people don't know what's right and wrong anymore because the lines have been blurred so much. When you go to salah and you see girls praying with the turban and their neck is showing, you may start to think that that's actually acceptable, that's okay. And no disrespect to anybody who wears a turban, no disrespect to anybody who wears hijab incorrectly, please. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody. I'm just trying to get at the core of the matter and really real talk with you guys right from wrong. So let's talk about it. What's the right way to wear hijab? What do we know from the Quran and from the Sunnah? Well, there are two ayat in the Quran that talk about very vividly, and the mufassirin, those who are in, all they do is study the Quran, have elucidated for us what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means with these two ayat. And I have them right here in front of me, and I actually have a blog post that's called, Is Hijab Really Mandatory? Is it really fuddled? It was based on a question I got from somebody, and it was a totally legit question, and I answered the question in full on the blog. We got 9 minutes, and then we might have to throw back on. So in the first ayah, and this is in Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 59, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to lower over themselves a portion of their garment. That is more suitable, that they will be known and not be harmed, and ever is Allah forgiving and merciful. All right, so let's start with this one first. So a lot of people say that hijab itself, number one, isn't mentioned in the Quran, and nowhere does it say we have to cover our head. It says that we have to drape this area. Well, people who say that, unfortunately, don't understand the context in which the ayah was revealed. So, let's talk about that. At the time of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, women wore a head covering. It was a remnant of the Christian tradition that had faded, because now they're all pagans, but it carried through. And how did they cover their hair? They wore like what you see today sometimes, a little like bandana almost, their ears and their neck all exposed, as well as the neck slit. So wherever their shirt came up to, whether it was like here or here, it was exposed, okay? But their hair was covered. That was already the tradition of the time, and women covered their hair. They just didn't cover everything. So when the ayah came down, what the ayah did was affirm the head covering, But in addition to that, now you have the covering of these other parts. So cover the ears, cover the neck, and the neck slit. All right, and that is what is meant by khimar, to like put the khimar. So it's affirming that this khimar exists. And if you look at the Lisan al-Arab, the like quintessential Arabic dictionary at the time, khimar meant the headscarf. So it's affirming that this headscarf exists, but now we need to cover. So what happened at the time when this ayah was revealed? What happened? What did the women do? Well, now we have a hadith. It is narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha that when this ayah came down, what did the women do? Immediately, they took the fabric, the extra fabric of their garments, that some of them were embroidered and had beautiful, fabric that clearly meant something to them because it was expensive or because it took a lot of labor for them to make themselves. They took that fabric, and this is how devoted they were to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They tore that fabric, and they immediately covered up those parts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded them to cover. They didn't look around for some man to tell them what to do. They heard the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they followed through, and they did it. And so they covered. Now, I will say that there's like an ongoing debate. I don't know what is more kind of accepted or not, but a lot of girls will take that and they drape the scarves over their scarf, like taking this very literally, and that's a correct interpretation. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you Jannat al-Firdaus for having that conviction. But another acceptable interpretation is that the skin has to be covered. Of course, the clothing still has to be loose, right? Like you can't wear a tight top and then just like cover everything. Of course, the clothing still has to be loose, but the skin, that neck, where the neck slit was, it has to be covered. Okay, so those are the two interpretations. So that's one ayah. Just for time's sake, I'm not going to get into the other ayah, but there are this blog post that I'm referring to is on the blog. Just search the word fardh or mandatory, or look at the Ask Melanie series and you'll see it. It's there. And I really highly recommend that you read this because it's very, very informative. And so what we understand is that the correct way to wear hijab is to cover everything. And this is from another hadith where the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam pointed to, who was it? I think it might have been Aisha. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember who it was, but basically the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a woman was basically coming of age, and he said to her, everything should be covered except for, and he pointed to her hands and her face, indicating that these are the things that we don't need to cover, but everything else has to be covered. All right, so number one, it's very important that we educate ourselves on what is proper, how to cover the correct way. And I see a lot of you guys saying, I feel guilty when I wear tights and, this and that and the other. That is the group that I'm talking about. You know what's right, but you're struggling. And it's something that's difficult and you're really working on it and you know that it's wrong, but you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you with it. But when we completely ignore and we disregard these things and say, no, I can interpret and wear it how I want, and out of this stubborn provocation, wallahi, not even just with hijab, with anything that we are insistent upon when we're wrong, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide you, because that is a wrath. I won't say a wrath. That is something that you don't want to be in that situation. You do not want to be in that situation. You do not want the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on you, because you refuse to accept what's right and tread on your own path arrogantly with, complete disregard. That's something we all have to be very, very careful of. And so, when we see the way that it's worn, number one, when we see the way that it's worn incorrectly, number one, don't jump to conclusions. Maybe they are in the first group of people. Maybe they've been influenced incorrectly by other people and they just think that it's okay because everyone else wears it that way. Maybe they really are struggling. But the point is not to even talk about those people. The point is to talk about ourselves, is to look into our hearts. Which people are we? In the first bucket of people, or are we in the second bucket of people? And if we're in the second bucket of people, where we know something is wrong, but we're doing it anyway, then let this be a wake-up call to all of us to start thinking about how we can get out of that mindset. And pray that El Ta'ala opens up our heart so that we accept what is right and we don't refute and refuse what is right. So I hope that was, oh no, did the sound go off? Someone said they can't hear me. I hope that was helpful just in terms of, what is right, what is the right way to wear hijab.